I touched infinity. A little talk about Annette Persohn from September the 3rd, 58 to September the 6th, 2024. Hello, everybody. A video I've tried to make several times in the last year, but have not been able to. There was a time in my life and my marriage where I touched infinity, and I'm going to share that with you today. So bear with me. If I pause the video, it's because I need to get on top of some things emotionally. So this is nearly a year since my darling Annette went to be with the Lord. The picture that you saw was from about halfway in our marriage. I think this is kind of how I remember her most. Charming, strong, fast, fit, very, very energetic, very playful. So we were married for 40 years. She was diagnosed with cancer in 2021 and began her descent, if you will, her journey. And yeah, it was a tough gig. But many of you know that story. This is not really what that's about. So as Annette began to fade, something interesting happened that I hope if I share this with you, it will help you in your journey. I've always wondered how the Father, the Son, and the Spirit would have perfect love in eternity with each other. And no, I'm an unabashed Trinitarian. Okay, this may not work if you're Unitarian or you haven't thought it through, but bear with me. The rest of the conversation is still fascinating. I've heard Trinitarian speakers say that God loves Himself perfectly. You think, oh, why? Well, if God is love and God is perfect, He would love Himself perfectly. That He's jealous for His own worship. Yes, well, that does make sense, etc. But I've often wondered how you could have three infinite persons with perfect love, one for each other, and sort of pondered. Tried to grasp this for years. All of these biblical statements or so on about God, really, we struggle with them because God is totally other. He is. We talk about transcendence and immanence. We know Him in both senses, but His transcendence is just beyond comprehension for us, and that's okay. I understand that. Well, as Annette went to the hospital, she was in the hospital a year ago exactly today, and let me just check today's date here. So that was the gee, I'm a mess. You know, I'm normally much better at that. So this is the 23rd of August, and she began to get a lot weaker over time, and as she got weaker, of course, there was less and less that we could do for her. And that's really, really hard to see. Now, I've never been able in our married life to look into her eyes for long periods of time. I'd always want to look away. I'm not sure why, guilty conscience maybe, or just a feeling of inadequacy or a feeling of discomfort. But during this time, we got to the place where, but Annette could always look in my eyes. She could just stare at me for long periods of time. And so, and, but at this time, I got to the place where I could sit beside her bed and look into her eyes all day long. If just that's it, we could just look quietly deep into each other's eyes. And it's kind of like we could touch something that was beyond, what otherwise we had in the past. Now, I spoke about the love between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit being three infinite persons. The one can do nothing for the other because none of the persons needs anything. Again, this is Trinitarian language, a bit cumbersome, a bit hard to deal with. Bear with me. The Bible is very clear that God needs nothing. He needs nothing. Someone says, oh, God needs me to do this. No, He doesn't. No. God has no need. He's not grieved by anything in the created order. He's not in time. He's above time. He's above all of those things. The experience that Annette and I had was really on the opposite end of that scale. Remember, I talked about the Father, the Son, and the Spirit not needing to do anything for the other. In our end of the scale, in our total limited existence, there's nothing that we could do for each other either. Okay? So as she got weaker and weaker, there was nothing I could do for her to help her. The doctors in the hospital had to do everything. And of course, she was so weak, there's nothing she could do to help me. She got to the point where she couldn't even hold her phone to type messages. We'd have to hold it for her while she would just type a message. And so those messages are very precious, and I've kept them into perpetuity. So we got to the place not of being infinitely powerful, but of being infinitely or nearly infinitely powerless, right on the other side of the equation. Now, I remember a day, it would be probably about the last day or second last day of August, because Annette fell asleep on the 2nd of September. Her birthday was the 3rd, and then she never woke up from that sleep, passed away on the 6th. But I remember somewhere around the last day of August, we were looking at each other's eyes quietly, just staring, really just very quiet. And in an extremely weak and feeble voice, Annette looked at me and she said, I, Annette, take you, Albert Persohn, to be my husband, to love you, to care for you, etc. I don't know the exact words. But it was at that time, ladies and gentlemen, for, I would say, that window probably lasted 20 seconds or 25 seconds while she said that. I had nothing to say. I was completely, emptied of any ability to reply. But it was at that time, for the tiniest window in time, and the only time so far in my life, where I could say that I touched infinity. Neither of us could do anything for the other, yet there was some element of perfection in that time. Now, you know that an event in your life changes you because you mark time from that event. Maybe it was a car accident or winning the lottery or whatever it is. I mark time from that event. I realize almost everything that I do once I stop and breathe goes back to that very sort of moment in time. I hear her saying it. I see it. I've even dreamt it. I've just recalled that, and it's like, So what am I saying here? The thing that I guess I'm trying to say is that in God's overall plan, there is a potential and a capacity for divine love between himself and his creation that is really unfathomable in our limited frame. That's why, I look at eternity, being in his presence and being in the presence of the saints, being and experiencing something so pure and so powerful and so eternal. It's truly wonderful. And that I have been privileged, just in this tiny little window, I've been privileged to possibly touch on it, and maybe, just maybe, to touch on it in such a way that I can communicate it with you today. God is love. Perfect love casts out all fear. Within him there is nothing but perfect love. Now, of course, we understand this requires justice and holiness and so on. But just in this element, there are things that I believe God has kept for his people into eternity that are really beyond comprehension. So this was just a very quick look, a video that I wanted to make. It's funny, the message that I'm going to preach tomorrow is oddly, just really coincidentally, I guess God incidentally, from the chaos monsters passage in Ezekiel and Isaiah, where once God destroys the chaos monsters, he leaves a calm sea. That's the last message that Annette ever heard me preach, was via a WhatsApp chat. I just had my phone on while that was happening, while she was in the hospital. And it's like, this is just so coincidental. Maybe just a little reminder of what that is. The chaos monsters in the Old Testament were Leviathan associated with Israel and Rahab associated with Egypt and some others. In the finished work of Christ, and of course they caused the sea to boil and the sea to froth, and you kind of have that picture. I love the term chaos monster. And in the book of Revelation, of course, we have the picture of the finished work of Christ by the sea of crystal. Saints in glory stand, as the hymn goes. In other words, once the job is done and the chaos monsters have been destroyed, it's calm and it's perfect. It's a magnificent picture. And so that was the message preached at the time. And I can still remember the picture that she sent me of her and her friend in the hospital watching it. Of course, that picture is very much a far cry from this precious woman who God gave me. My name is Al Persohn. Thank you for visiting with me. I hope this means something to you. And I'll be back again. I don't know about next week because I'm going to be on the road, but we'll see.